Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors. Ray Eldridge Jewelry, elegance without the attitude. Peoria and Decatur. Physician's Choice Wellness. Give your weight away today. And Buffalo Wild Wings. Mattoon, Champaign, Savoy.
This is Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football, the show that takes you inside the Illinois football program each week. We'll get interviews, we'll be at practices, we'll show you some game footage, and we'll talk about this week's matchup from all angles. I'm Matt Lovelace from Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy, coming to you this week as the Illini get ready for the final third of the season, which includes a matchup in Columbus against Ohio State this week. Now, of course, we'll look back at last week's Fighting Illini game against Indiana. We'll talk about the Big Ten and some of the shakeups near the top, especially in the Legends division. But of course, we always defer most of the expertise to our panel. Bob Osmussen of the Champaign News-Gazette, the voice of the Illini, Brian Barnhart, and Steve Kelly with WDWS Radio. Those guys will hit on some of the big topics throughout college football. Plus, we'll go back to them in each segment to get their opinions on the Illini. We'll go to them right now, guys.
Thanks, Matt. And guys, as you look around college football, I think the big story, one of the big stories certainly the other night was Notre Dame. I guess they're better than I thought they were. They go to Oklahoma and win that game easily, Bob.
Yeah, I was very, very surprised. Obviously, I picked Oklahoma. I thought that's a game Bob Stoops usually wins, but Notre Dame has showed me a lot. Their offense is still probably not good enough to win a national championship. I don't believe they are, but boy, they are impressing voters. They're impressing computers. And right now, if they keep winning, they could very well play for the national championship. And nobody would have said that before the start of the season.
Notre Dame went through a bunch of coaches after Lou Holtz, and they were trying to find the right one, Willingham and Weiss, and on down the list. I think they found the guy they need in Kelly, who did a great job at Cincinnati, came up there, kind of got his system installed. The thing that's blown me away is the defense, how good they are defensively. You go to Norman and shut down the Sooners, you've done something.
They are very good. I will tell you something, though. They're not as good as the team they're chasing. Alabama, and I just saw this point spread, I think favored by 13 points if they played on a neutral field. I still think Alabama is the cream. I think it's Alabama's up here, they're 1A, and everybody else is a notch below. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be beat, but I think if you look at Alabama and what they've been able to accomplish over the course of time, Nick Saban is the preeminent coach in college football right now. He is to college football, really, he's kind of turned into almost a John Wooden type. Now, he's got to win a couple more titles to get there, but boy, the guy does a great job year after year.
He just kind of reloads every year, and wouldn't this be we've been saying this for a while, but wouldn't this be a great year for the playoff to start? Although I'm not sure anybody would beat Alabama.
No, that's hard to know, but the good thing is, and you point out, if you had a 4-team playoff right now, you got your obvious 4 teams, Kansas State, Alabama, obviously, and Notre Dame, certainly, and Oregon. Right now, the way it's lined up, Oregon could be very angry here at the end of the year. They could be a perfect team with a bunch of impressive wins and not get anything out of it.
Yeah, they keep scoring a lot of points, but they dropped, below the other two. And Kansas State just keeps plugging along. What a great job Bill Snyder's done in his return.
And in the Big Ten, we'll talk more about this as we move along. But a game that I missed, you missed the game. The one I missed, I had Ohio State that maybe stumbling a bit on the road at Penn State. But the Buckeyes came through and won that ball game. That was impressive, I thought.
Yeah, Urban Meyer is a great coach. And you give him equal footing with talent-wise, he's going to beat you. He's going to beat you almost every time. He went to Penn State, emotional team, but they were just a little bit better. And I think Ohio State, to me, they look like a 12-0 team. I've got them number 5 on my ballot this week. And honestly, if everybody else loses and Ohio State is undefeated, Ohio State will be at the top of my ballot at the end of the year.
We'll talk more about that as we move along. Right now, we'll throw it back to Matt.
Hey, thanks, guys. Coming up next, we'll talk about that homecoming game. Competitive for most of it, but ultimately we just ended up where we started. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy for Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football, talking the Illinois-Indiana game. Now, coaches won't usually admit things like this, but on each schedule, there's games that you're likely to lose and games that you really should win. And a game on homecoming against an Indiana team that hadn't won a Big Ten game in 2 years, this really fell under the should-win category for most of the season for Illinois. It's not exactly how it turned out, as our Central Illinois GMC dealers give us our look in the rear view.
Indiana rode into Memorial Stadium on an 11-game Big Ten losing streak. They had dropped 23 of their last 24. The Illini weren't much better, dropping their last 9 conference contests. But even if it wasn't pretty, at least we expected it to be competitive. Despite a highly touted up-tempo Indiana offense, the Illini forced a quick 3-and-out, and the offense, doing what it had struggled to do for more than a month, marched downfield. Nate Shieldhouse hit Eddie Valunas, a 2-yard touchdown, 7-0 just more than 5 minutes in. Then the teams traded punches. The Hoosiers tied it on the legs of junior running back Stephen Houston. The Illini responded. Shieldhouse doing it with his feet. A 5-yard touchdown run, 14-7 Illini. And the guy who started the season as Indiana's third-string quarterback, freshman Nate Sudfeld, carved up the Illinois defense, finishing it off with a 10-yard screen to Houston. 5 minutes later, Indiana with the ball again. Houston with his feet again. Indiana took a 21-14 lead into halftime. The teams traded field goals in the third, and entering the fourth, the Illini were down just 7. But 2 of their last 4 drives went for negative yardage. Indiana didn't have that problem. Sudfeld to Shane Wynn, a 17-yard nail in the coffin. And an all-too-frequent sight this season, fans piling out of Memorial Stadium in droves. And few saw Indiana in the victory formation. 31-17 was the final, dropping Illinois to 2-6.
I don't think anybody on our football team's a loser, and we're fighters, and we have to fight.
We're doing the right things. We're working hard. We're believing in each other. There'll come a time, hopefully it's soon, where it's gonna click.
We got to make something happen on Saturdays. It doesn't matter how hard we work during the week. I mean, we have to get it done on Saturday.
Big issues remain, including turnovers, 2 fumbles that led to 10 Indiana points, and bad penalties, extending 3 different Hoosier touchdown drives.
We can't do those things. We're not a good enough football team, or anybody's a good enough football team to do those things. And it ended up, biting us, and we end up losing a football game.
Well, the Illini come up short against Indiana on homecoming, as you just saw, 31-17. And guys, you look at the stats. Illinois had 80 more yards overall. They had nearly 10 more first downs. They held Indiana to 1 out of 13 on third down and lose by 2 touchdowns.
They won in dumb plays, though. They won in dumb plays. A punt returner running 30 yards to catch a ball that's going to probably go out of bounds. Dumb play. A defensive lineman who knows better hitting a guy out of bounds on third down, which would have turned the ball over. Dumb play. A defensive lineman, 5th-year guy, jumping off sides on 4th and 1. Dumb play. There's just too many of those things happening for Illinois. So it doesn't matter. You can outgain somebody by 2,000 yards. If you cannot keep yourself from making those mistakes, you're not going to beat anybody.
Yeah, those mistakes were costly, Steve, and it was when they happened, and to Indiana's credit, they took advantage of it.
Illinois actually had the lead twice, 7-0 and 14-7, and then those plays, as you mentioned, not only did the player hit the other player out of bounds, it was way out of bounds. There was no doubt about that. And the one on Hawthorne, that was on the field. That's one you could probably argue as an aggressive play. But yeah, the mistakes, 81 yards and penalties. You're not going to win many games like that. And you mentioned Tommy Davis. That basically cost him his job, at least for now. They're going to replace him back in the backfield returning punts, and you can't give teams that many opportunities to stay in the game.
That's 2 fumbled punts by Tommy, and this is what he was brought to Illinois to do, return punts. So these are critical mistakes. These are things that you have to fix. And Tim Beckman's going to get the blame for it because he is the head coach. The buck stops there. We understand that part. But you can only do so much as a coach. You can tell your guys, hey, don't go get that punt. Please don't hit somebody out of bounds. Now, what he's got to do now, and he's doing this with Tommy Davis, punish those guys, okay? If you hit somebody out of bounds, don't play the next play. Don't play the next series. Don't play the next quarter. You're not playing again, okay? Stop making those mistakes, because until you stop making those mistakes, you're not going to beat anybody.
That's one thing Coach Beckman does do, is when they make a personal foul like that, he does take them out of the game, he has said. But the surprising thing was it was the seniors, the upperclassmen who were making the mistakes, not the young guys.
Tim Salem told me on Wednesday that he's a special teams coach. He told me on Wednesday they were having open tryouts basically among the players on the team. Anybody want to try to field punts? They were giving everybody a look midweek, and we'll see how what they came up with if everybody stepped up on that.
Yeah, that won't be a lot of fun in Columbus with about 150,000 fans there. So That's not a good setup.
A couple of bright spots on defense. One, Illinois did slow down the Indiana offense, which was at the top of the league in total offense. Jonathan Brown, Butkus candidate, 11 tackles, and Mason Monheim, another 10 tackles. So those guys have continued to play well individually, just got to do it as a unit.
And offensively, no question, Donovan Young had one of his best games as an Illini. Ran very well and fumbled. And you'd like to not say and fumbled. You'd like to say ran well, period. But that's the flaw you got to get through.
Donovan Young, as you mentioned, ran well, 124 yards, career high, 24 carries, 21 carries, something in that neighborhood, and a good day for him. But you mentioned the fumble, and then all you got to do is point at the scoreboard, and that's where they're coming up short.
Statistically, a good day as well for Nathan Shieldhouse on the stat sheet, but unfortunately for Illinois, they come up short to Indiana. We'll see how they can do against the Buckeyes this week. More on that a little later. Let's go back to Matt.
Thanks, guys. And to your point about Donovan Young, he admitted it himself after the game. All the good stuff he did didn't matter because they didn't end up with the W. Well, next up, we'll talk about the Leaders Division in our beginning of a wrap-up of the Big Ten. That's next on Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Weekly MVP is brought to you by Shields, Gear, Passion, Sports. It's the most valuable Illini player from each week's game. And yet another diamond in the rough this week, Donovan Young, in one of the best rushing performances by the Illini this season, accounted for 124 yards on the ground, close to 6 yards a carry.
It was a lot of one-on-one with the safety, so, when you're a running back, that's...
Young also caught 4 passes for 21 yards, a career day for the sophomore.
Welcome back to Inside the Illini here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy. Now, even with the head-to-head matchup between Ohio State and Penn State, both teams still seem to distance themselves from the rest of the pack in the Leaders Division, and still neither can go to the Big Ten championship game. Our Eric Harold continues our look into a strange year in the Leaders.
Thanks, Matt. Clash of the Titans in the Leaders Division as 5-2 Penn State hosts undefeated Ohio State. Defensive struggle throughout the first half until this. Mike Ho blocks the punt. Penn State recovers in the end zone for the touchdown. Nittany Lions up by a score. Ohio State answers. Braxton Miller hands off to Carlos Hyde, punches it in for the touchdown, all knotted up. It would be knotted up in the second half. Matthew McGloin drops back, throws it to a white jersey. That's bad. Ryan Shazier takes it into the end zone. Ohio State takes the lead, and here comes Braxton Miller. Gets blown up in the backfield, but he's still on his feet. Leaps into the end zone for the touchdown. Ohio State wins this one big, 35-23 over Penn State. Meanwhile, Michigan State Spartans headed to Madison to try to knock off 25th ranked Wisconsin. This is a season-changing play for the Badgers. Joel Stave taken down hard by William Golston. Broken collarbone knocks out Stave. He will not return for the rest of this season. Despite losing Stave, they would hold on to a lead until this. Le'Veon Bell takes a shovel pass into the end zone, ties it up at 10. The game would go to overtime. Wisconsin settled for a field goal on their possession, but not Michigan State. Benny Fowler catches a touchdown pass from Andrew Maxwell. That ends it. Michigan State knocks off Wisconsin 16-13. And finally, rounding out the Leaders Division, Purdue remains winless in the Big Ten as they fall to Minnesota 44-28. Minnesota, led by their 19-year-old freshman, Philip Nelson, 3 touchdowns in his second start. That's it for the Leaders Division. And now, back to the Inside the Illini team in Savoy.
We know where the Leaders Trophy's going. It's going to go to Columbus, but we don't know who is going to go to Indianapolis from the Leaders. We can assume it's going to be Wisconsin. It looks like it's going to be Wisconsin. We know it's not going to be Ohio State, and that's unfortunate. We can look back at Ohio State's situation and realize, like at Penn State, the people involved there now had very little to do with any of this. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances, and as you look at the NCAA, what they're doing now, they're going to get tougher on programs. They're not going to get easier. So this may be a precursor of things to come down the road. But so I guess we should embrace Wisconsin as the Leaders Division champion and go from there.
Well, you mentioned Ohio State is going to win that division. That's becoming pretty apparent. They're undefeated. They've got a chip on their shoulder, as you might guess, with all this. All they can do is go 12-0. That's the best they can do this season, and I think Urban Meyer is using that that as a carrot, as a motivation out there for these guys to just beat everybody on the schedule, win all the games they could possibly win.
Yep. Well, last week Bob said, "Hey, Wisconsin's going to win the division, and then they're going to go to the Big Ten championship game." But they had their 21-game winning streak snapped at Camp Randall last week by Michigan State, and every one of those games has been right down to the wire. It's just an amazing game to watch.
So maybe Purdue gets on a run and catches them. Well, it won't be Purdue.
Yeah.
And it could, maybe it's Indiana is the hope outside of Wisconsin. Indiana's the one team that I believe can catch Wisconsin, so that's kind of crazy. One thing that Ohio State's playing for beyond national recognition is Braxton Miller, outside of Colin Klein, has a pretty legitimate shot to become, he's a Heisman favorite at this, I mean, not a favorite, but a finalist at this point. And if things break the right way, he could be the winner if it all works out right. A lot of people have they love him. They think he's a great player. And I think before he leaves Ohio State, he will win a Heisman Trophy.
Urban Meyer was slow to get on the Braxton Miller bandwagon, at least publicly.
Right.
But now he's on it. He says, yeah, I think he is a Heisman Trophy candidate. He's better, in my opinion, and I've watched Ohio State football for years. He's much better than Terrell Pryor. He does more things than Pryor. Pryor was bigger. He can run over you a little better, but Miller can run away from you. And he's getting a little bit better. He's not a great passer, Bob, but he's getting better as a passer.
I think if you're a psychology student, you're looking at the Purdue and Penn State game, trying to figure, okay, how does Penn State bounce back?
Right.
What is Purdue going through right now? Because Morgan Burke, the AD, issued a statement about the statement of the program. Danny Hope, obviously, under pressure there to try to win a game. They had Ohio State on the ropes and let them off. How do they play at home? Do they rebound? They did rush for 200 yards at Minnesota last week.
But laid an egg otherwise, right?
Laid an egg otherwise. How does that game turn out?
Yeah, that's a huge game for Purdue, obviously. A huge game for Danny Hope. If they lose, Danny Hope should start packing his bags, honestly.
Yeah.
And that's the way it looks.
All right, we'll throw things back to Matt at this point, Matt.
Thanks, Steve. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the Legends division, where it's kind of a carousel up top for those teams. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Play of the Week is sponsored by our local Anheuser-Busch distributor, Skeff Distributing, and it comes from Illini defensive back Steve Hull, winning a game of fly-up. When it was tied early, Hull playing his heart out, a deep Indiana pass. Hull comes down with the interception, his second INT this season. Now, he eventually had to leave the game with a flare-up of an existing shoulder injury, playing hurt, playing very well for our Play of the Week.
Welcome back to Inside the Illini. Now, as I stand here right now, there are 4 Legends Division teams in the Big Ten within 1 game of the division lead. Makes for an interesting race down to the end here. Eric Harold takes us back to the weekend highlights.
Thanks, Matt. Legends Division. The Wolverines, 22nd in the country, taking on the Huskers of Nebraska. Second quarter, Taylor Martinez looks down the field, floats it over the top to Kenny Bell. 32-yard touchdown, 7-0 Nebraska in the first half. Michigan trying to come back to Nard Robinson. Looks right, runs, can't quite turn the corner, gets close to the first down marker. He is slow to get up. An arm injury would knock Robinson out of this game. He will be a game-time decision later today against Minnesota. And without Robinson, the Wolverines were not able to defeat the Huskers. They lose 23-9. Mark D'Antonio and the Michigan State Spartans taking on the Wisconsin Badgers out of the Leaders Division. Fourth quarter, Michigan State trailing. Andrew Maxwell looks for Lawrence Thomas in the flat. He picks up a few yards, but the ball comes loose. Wisconsin recovers in the red zone. That would lead to points for Wisconsin as Kyle French kicks a 39-yard field goal to give them a 7-point lead with about 6 minutes left on the clock. But Michigan State would come back. Andrew Maxwell shovel pass to Le'Veon Bell. Touchdown Michigan State ties it up. It would go to overtime. Andrew Maxwell looking for the end zone. Benny Fowler, game-winning touchdown catch. Michigan State knocks off Wisconsin. They win 16-13. Elsewhere in the Legends Division, Northwestern, led by Kane Coulter, their all-purpose quarter wide receiving back. He ran for 166 yards, scored 4 total touchdowns, and led Northwestern to a 28-17 win over Iowa. And finally, Minnesota, led by their 19-year-old freshman quarterback, Philip Nelson, gets their first Big Ten win over Purdue from the Leaders Division. They win 44-28. Philip Nelson scores 3 touchdowns on the way to that victory. That's it for the Legends division. And now, back to the Inside the Illini team in Savoy.
As Matt mentioned, fellas, all kinds of action in the Legends division, and Michigan State could really throw something on the fire, so to speak, in this one if they could beat Nebraska today. We'll talk more about that game a little bit later on, but they could get themselves right back in it, and a few other teams as well.
Somebody figured this out, somebody smarter than I am. If Michigan State can beat Nebraska, which they play in East Lansing,
right.
If Nebraska loses once more, if Iowa loses twice, and Michigan loses 3 times, Michigan State wins the division. Somebody figured that out.
And Michigan State looked dead against Wisconsin, and came back in the last seconds of that game and obviously played great in overtime. Don't kid yourself in Nebraska. They got really lucky when Denard Robinson re-injured himself in that game. That hand injury or whatever he has, that completely changed the way Michigan played, not in a good way. Their backup quarterback could not hit a pass. He did hit passes to the Nebraska guys. And so Nebraska very, very fortunate. I believe they were going to lose that game if Denard stays in the game. But without him, Nebraska was able to win, set themselves up. They are in control of their own destiny, but that didn't mean a whole lot, like you said, when you go to Michigan State, where Michigan State's pretty good. And so, if Nebraska loses this game, it's all bets are off again.
And Northwestern's sitting back there at 3-2 with the bye week this week, and they're just sitting back and let the other guys knock each other around and see where they might fall. It's very interesting.
Yeah, in Nebraska, they played what they thought was the best defense they had played this year with Michigan. And Michigan held them to 23 points. Now they're going to East Lansing. Michigan State, I think, got 6 sacks in the first 8 games, had 5 at Wisconsin last weekend. So they're very tough defensively at home, very physical game. And the other game, looking at the Little Brown Jug, Minnesota, Michigan. Michigan beat them last year 58-0.
Right.
So here's the rematch. Minnesota's better. They are starting a freshman quarterback, but they're home, and Phil Nelson at the helm. And can they upset, and how healthy is Denard?
Jerry Kill, 1 win away from bowl eligibility. I thought going into the year he'd have a chance to do that. They've exceeded expectations. I think the win against Purdue was huge. They still got a game at Illinois, which they'll be favored in or close to favored in. So I so admire what he's been able to do, given the illness that he's faced, given all the limitations there, given the disaster that he inherited. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I don't think they'll beat Michigan, but I think they have a chance to play Michigan a close game. And honestly, if you're Minnesota right now, that's a huge step forward.
Michigan playing at Minnesota, as you mentioned, and Michigan also out of the corner of their eye rooting for Michigan State to knock off Nebraska there. And
they don't like that.
They don't like having to do that, but it can make things interesting before the day's out.
And I would say based on how Iowa, without now their starting tailback again, they go to Indiana. We just saw Indiana, how good they can be and how good they can be at home. Can Iowa at 4-4, can they get bowl eligible? They need to win at Indiana and don't be shocked if they get beat.
Yep.
Several games we mentioned here will show up a little bit later on in our picks, and that'll be interesting to see how we pick those. At this point, though, we'll throw things back to Matt.
Thanks, guys. Next up, we'll take our latest look at Illini and the pros. A lot of activity from the guys that used to don the orange and blue. That's next on Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football.
The Inside the Illini Gem of the Week is brought to you by Ray Eldridge Jewelry. Elegance without the attitude in Peoria and Decatur. From last week's Ohio State-Penn State game and giving an idea of what the Illini are up against this week, Braxton Miller, who a week before left the stadium in an ambulance, making the Penn State defense look silly. Dodges a tackle, leaps into the end zone, part of a big day for the sophomore QB, and Ohio State's 35-23 win.
Welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football here at Buffalo Wild Wings in Savoy. Talking some NFL now. Rashard Mendenhall relegated to the sidelines once again. A big day for Brandon Lloyd. And Michael LaShore trying to recover from a tough Week 7. Our latest look at Illini and the pros is now with Noah Newman.
Good morning, Matt. I tell you what, a lot of big showings from former Illini and the pros in Week 8, and we'll start with Brandon Lloyd and the New England Patriots, perhaps none bigger than Lloyd this week, on a big stage in front of 80,000 plus fans at historic Wembley Stadium in London. Now, he only had 2 catches for 28 yards, but boy did he make them count. Here's the first one. Wide open in the corner of the end zone, Tom Brady hits him from 19 yards out. That made it 7-7. Lloyd was not done. Later on in the game, Brady going to find Lloyd again on this quick 9-yard slant, and that made it 35-7. Patriots go on to blow out the Rams, and afterwards Lloyd talked about his big performance.
Penalties, drop passes, interceptions, when we don't do those things, it gives us a better chance of scoring, and that's what we focused on all week.
Now another big performance to tell you about. Second-year defensive tackle Corey Legit with the San Diego Chargers checked in with arguably his best performance of his young career, had 5 tackles, that's a season high for him, also a sack, which accounted for a 9-yard loss, but unfortunately for him, his team lost to the Browns 7-6. That's going to do it for here in the studio. We'll send it back to you guys in Savoy with more on Illini and the Pros.
Well, some of the highlights, you probably saw Brandon Lloyd playing overseas in London at Wembley Stadium, and where they had the big Olympics, of course, this last summer, and didn't catch a lot of footballs on Sunday, but certainly had a big day in the end zone.
Yep, got 2 touchdown passes, caught 2 passes, both going for touchdowns in a game that the Rams forgot to go over there, I think.
Apparently, maybe they had too much whatever you eat in England. I don't know. Or too much ale, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Or too much visits to the Tower of London or whatever. But yeah, Brandon obviously enjoyed himself. I could see him doing well over there. So that was a great game for the Patriots. And Tavon Wilson got a start and played well again. All rookie team, I think, for him at this point. Pretty clearly, not rookie of the year type, because there's some other guys that'll get that. But certainly he'll be on some all rookie teams. And what a great pick by the Patriots. Again, showing the talent of that organization and how well they're able to put things together.
Yeah, player development, a big part of that. Omanawanui. I always get tickled at the national guys trying to pronounce that when he gets in the game. He was involved in the game. And LaShore didn't have a big day for Detroit, but certainly got some yards.
Mikel, 46 yards on 10 carries, also caught 3 passes in that game last week. And Whitney Merciless had the day off. He spent the day in Champaign watching his alma mater try to win the homecoming game. That didn't work out so well. And we always probably should mention Steve Weatherford, because he averaged 46, 47 yards a punt last week, and he's in that conversation as one of the top punters in the league.
He is, certainly, and they got a big win, controversial win obviously at the end, but Steve certainly did his part. He does his part every week, and he has a lot of fun doing it, so you love watching him play.
He's a good guy, and a guy that when Ron Zook was here as his coach, told him how to maybe cut down the number of steps he was taking when he punted, said this will get you to the NFL, and that move certainly paid off for Steve Weatherford. That's a look at the Illini and the Pros. Let's go back to Matt.
Thanks, guys. Up next, we'll move back to college, talking about a lot more great topics in Charleston, Eastern Illinois. A great week against a ranked team on the road. That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini. Now, Eastern Illinois went on the road last week to take on an 18th ranked Eastern Kentucky team and came out of the weekend in a tie for first in the OVC standings. We go inside the Panthers with Eastern Illinois University.
A first-place showdown in Richmond, Kentucky, as Eastern Illinois took on the Colonels of Eastern Kentucky. The Panthers had tasted defeat at the hands of EKU in their last 5 meetings, but this battle between OVC rivals would go EIU's way. Points were at a premium in the first half. Late in the first quarter, the Panthers scored first. The second quarter ended with EKU scoring late in the quarter, and at halftime the game was tied at 7. EIU flexed their muscles in the third quarter and put 10 points on the board.
Duncan carries for a touchdown, 10:38 to go third quarter.
Through 3 quarters, the Panthers offense tallied 17 points. The Panther D brought their A game and had their best effort of the season. Behind the efforts of OVC Defensive Player of the Week, Artavius Dowdell, EIU's defense recorded 5 sacks and 12 tackles for loss and limited the Colonels to only 7 points. Eric Laura's touchdown catch in the fourth quarter and Tavares Crawford's interception late in the fourth sealed the victory as the Panthers won 24-7.
tailback was like 10th in the nation in rushing and had a whole bunch of 6 or 7 games of over 100 yards, and they were able to keep him under 100 yards and keep him bottled up. And then the pressure on the quarterback was just outstanding. I don't know how many sacks we had, but I know it was a lot. And I just can't say enough about their effort. They kept a very, very good EKU offense bottled up, and defensively, I mean, what could you ask for? I mean, their defense was fabulous. They ran around and they made plays, and they gave us a lot of trouble on offense. But for our defense to step up and play like this in a game this big was really exciting, and I'm really happy for them.
With 2 games left in conference for EIU, the Panthers have their sights set on an OVC championship. Later today, they are on the road at Tennessee Tech. The Golden Eagles have come up on the short end of all their OVC games this season, but EIU head coach Dino Babers says that Tech has what it takes to come out on top in today's matchup.
As coaches, we've got to get across to our kids that these guys are a lot better than their record, that they could be a 4-2 team in our conference, a 5-1 team in our conference. And if we don't get that across, we're gonna be in trouble. We're not gonna come back here with dry eyes. So we've got to find a way to get that across. This is a quality football team that's just had a bad luck with injuries this year. And as they get people healthy, this team is going to turn into the team that had a chance to win the conference championship.
We haven't even been clicking on all cylinders yet, and that's what I'm really excited for, is when defense has a game like they had against EKU, and we have a game like we had against Murray State, and it all ties together, and it's going to be fun.
EIU and Tennessee Tech will kick off at 1:30 today from Cookeville, Tennessee, with the Panthers looking to stay on top of the OVC. Reporting on the Eastern Illinois Panthers for Inside the Illini, I'm Ryan Snodgrass of WEIU TV.
And as always, thanks to Eastern for that report. Now up next, our Healthy Choice Pick'ems. We'll prognosticate in some of the big games in the league. Plus, we go to Facebook to answer your questions about Illini football. That's next on Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. I've joined the desk for our Healthy Choice Pick'ems, brought to you by Physicians Choice Wellness. Give your weight away today. Each week we're making our picks, and we'll take a look at the standings, tally those up, and see who comes out on top. Now, let's put those standings up right now. A tough week for a few of us. Brian, you're closing the gap on us a little bit, but Steve, Bob, and I each dropped to 6-2. Brian, you got your Nebraska pick correct. 3 of us got ours wrong, so we weren't perfect like we were the last few weeks before that, but some tough picks there, a bunch of closer games, and I think we got some good ones on tap, and I'll start with mine. I'm sticking with the Big Ten, Iowa and Indiana. Now, we just saw this Indiana team play. I don't know about you guys, but I was impressed with the way they moved the ball, and we knew coming in that offensively they're going to be a better team than they have been in the past. I'm going to let it ride. I'm picking Indiana to beat Iowa. I haven't been impressed with Iowa's wins. I've been more impressed with Indiana's losses this season, and of course their schedule hasn't played well into that record, playing Michigan State, playing Ohio State, so I'm picking Indiana to beat Iowa.
You know it's not basketball, right?
Yes,
I just want to make sure that's clear. It's not talking basketball. Okay, football. Okay, Indiana, we got you.
I'm going to stay in the Big Ten as well. I'm going to go with 20th ranked Nebraska playing on the road at Michigan State. Nebraska 3-1 in the league. Michigan State at 2-3. I've kind of been kicking it around in my mind during the show, going back and forth. I'm going to go with Nebraska winning on the road at Spartan Stadium. I think it'll be a close game. Could be another 1 or 2 point games like the Ohio State game when they went in and won there. But I'm going with the Cornhuskers over the Spartans later today.
Going back out to the West Coast for mine, Oregon and USC. Now, USC beat Oregon last year in Eugene. Since then, Oregon has scored 40 or more points in every game, every single game since then. They had 600 yards of offense against a bad Colorado team last week to win 70-14, outscored their opponents 290-56 in the first half. Now, USC is only giving up 19.5 points a game, so they're doing well on that side, and they have Marquise Lee and Woods. They've got a great receiving tandem. Barkley's a good quarterback. The game is in the Coliseum, but I'm going to go with Oregon to win at USC.
USC's shown some vulnerabilities, too.
I think so.
I could use all that statistical stuff, or I could just say Alabama, LSU, A, it's the best game in the country this week, and B, Alabama is the best team in the best game. A year ago, LSU went to Tuscaloosa, beat the Crimson Tide, close game. I think we get the reverse this time, although I don't think it'll be quite as close as last year. I really love what the Crimson Tide are doing. Nick Saban's great, the quarterback's great, the defense is spectacular, and I think they win, and I think they're on their way to another national title.
Probably expect a few more points from Alabama in this edition.
I would think, yeah, maybe getting to the 20s at least or something.
A shootout in the SEC.
Well, if you pick the Alabama game every week, you're probably going to win this contest.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Should have done that.
You might as well do that.
Yeah, but see, first week I picked Michigan, so
that's right. Yeah. Strategy came in too late, I guess. Well, hey, let's move to Facebook and answer your questions about Fighting Illini football. And we dug one up from Dee Stewart, and I think this one's relevant now. She asked this one a few weeks ago, but how has team morale been affected by the new coach? And that's a good question, because from the outside looking in, I think there's a little more animosity building every week toward Coach Beckman, toward his staff. How do you think the team is reacting to that?
Well, I think it's obvious the morale is down. Now, whether it's directed directly at the coaching staff, we'll have to wait and see. All you got to do is look around the community, around the state. Morale of the fans is down as well, and these things snowball. They add up. When you lose 10 straight Big Ten games, the morale's going to be down.
Yeah, I think winning and losing has a lot to do with it. Football is unique in that there's just so few games. You spend so much emotion getting ready for one game, then you have to start over again. Basketball, you lose a game, you got a game in a couple of days.
Right.
I think that when you start losing, it can snowball on you.
When you have a change in staff, a lot of guys are going to be loyal to the old staff, to the old coaches. They all love Vic, for instance, on defense. And so it can take some time. And I think when you lose it just exacerbates that, makes it worse. So you really need those coaches and players to get together. I don't know that's, I don't know. It's impossible to tell from the outside what it's like in that locker room, but I have to assume there have been some very down moments. I also have to assume that that's a thing that takes some time, and maybe a year from now we won't even be talking about it.
And I've seen them interact. We've hosted them on our radio show, have them at different quarterback club events and so forth. And the players and Coach Beckman and the staff all seem to be really close. So, I mean, publicly, they seem to get along really well, and it doesn't seem to be fake or not sincere. So who knows? But I mean, you have how many guys on a football team?
Right.
Probably not everybody happy all the time, but that's human nature.
Well, to your point about things building, a 6-game losing streak is half the season. It's like an 80-game losing streak in baseball.
Yeah.
It's apples to oranges, but still the frustration mounts that much more. It's magnified that much more with each loss. So it's a little different from the outside looking in. I know the team's frustrated, but I don't think the morale is quite as low as it can be. All right, well, thanks a lot for that question, Dee. We'll send you a $25 Buffalo Wild Wings gift card. Make sure to ask your questions. We can do the same for you as well. Well, coming up next, last segment, we'll talk about The Ohio State University, a team that's proving that you don't really need a bowl game to have motivation. They're now 9-0. That's next on Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. Welcome back to Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. Now the Illini are in Columbus preparing to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes, only undefeated team left in the Big Ten. Now the Buckeyes can't play for a Big Ten championship, but they're putting together a pretty good case for that best team in the Big Ten moniker. Our O'Brien Auto Park of Urbana weekly preview looks at the Buckeyes.
The Buckeyes, like many undefeated teams, haven't arrived there easily. In Week 3, they needed a late touchdown to hold off an average Cal team. They snuck a 1-point win past Michigan State, and they beat Indiana by 3, despite giving up 49 points. But all that matters is that they found a way to win all of them.
We're the only team in America can line up and try to get win number 10 this weekend, so that means a lot to us.
The player to key in on will be Braxton Miller. He's the nation's 5th leading rusher as a sophomore quarterback.
I've been around Braxton a little bit more because I knew him in high school, and he's a tremendous athlete.
Do I believe he's a Heisman candidate? I do. From just sheer production of a team that's 9-0, puts him in that category.
Miller suffered a scary injury 2 weeks ago. He was hauled off in an ambulance against Purdue. Now, he returned last week, and while he was less than effective passing, he still rushed for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. It appears at least that injury didn't slow him down.
I had to get back in my footwork all throughout this week, and I just had to practice on it.
Miller does have some complementary pieces. Running back Carlos Hyde has added a solid 600 yards to the stat sheet. And when the Buckeyes do go to the air, the tandem of Devin Smith and Philly Brown have accounted for 1,000 yards and 7 receiving touchdowns.
It starts with their O-line. They're a big, tough group. They're extremely physical. The backs run extremely hard.
Their only vulnerability appears to be their defense. In their last 4, they've averaged 33 points allowed per game.
Our team fundamentally is not where we need to be. We need to keep pushing that envelope,
a lot of young players playing and a lot of players maybe that just aren't ready.
Now a side story here, Tim Beckman and Ohio State coach Urban Meyer are longtime friends, dating back to their coaching days at Bowling Green. Beckman said this week the number of phone calls between the two has dwindled of late.
Talked to him quite a bit last year when he was on TV, but a little bit less, of course, because we are in the same conference.
Well, we hear a name a lot there, Miller. Braxton Miller is a name we're going to talk about a lot this week. We'll probably talk about a lot in the stat sheet. Feels like we were preparing for Michigan, and we're talking about Denard Robinson this way. A lot of comparisons there between those two guys.
I think so. I think Braxton Miller, and Bob, you may disagree. You guys may all disagree. I think he's better than Denard. I think I think he will be better if he's not already. He has a little more number of weapons in his repertoire. I think he's improving as a passer. I think he's a good runner. He'll run over you as well as run around you. He comes from that Ohio pedigree. He's only an hour away from Columbus, and I think he's an outstanding guy and one that, as we mentioned earlier, is in the Heisman talk.
And I believe he ties his shoes, so that automatically puts him ahead of Denard Robinson. Tying your shoes to me seems kind of a logical thing for a football player. I don't know why they don't do that, but Braxton Miller, yes, definitely a great player, a guy that everybody knew was going to be good when he got there, but I think he's even developed a little bit more than people thought. But he's got some help. That's the bottom line here. The guy's got some help. He's got receivers that are kind of coming out of the woodwork. He's got tight ends that are coming out of the woodwork. The offensive line is protecting him well. So there's a reason they're undefeated, and it isn't just him, but he plays a huge part in it. I think you start at the top, though. I think Urban Meyer, it was kind of a no-brainer hire. The guy was sitting there. He was covering the Big Ten for ESPN. He was scouting, basically.
Right.
And you knew that when that job opened, it was his to take, and then he parlayed it into a perfect situation. Urban Meyer's going to win national titles at Ohio State, probably very soon, and he's not. Braxton Miller isn't the last great quarterback that can come through there because the guy has produced players, so he's just going to keep doing it.
And Miller at 2,600 combined yards this year already.
Right.
Now think about how far he's come and how quickly, because in the Illinois game last year, he completed one pass. It was a touchdown pass in the fourth quarter of that ball game, and they didn't need him necessarily to throw a lot. I think he only threw 7 or 8 times the entire ball game. But Urban Meyer, interesting storyline to this game is his connection to Tim Beckman, because they both were at Bowling Green together. In fact, Beckman could have moved with Urban Meyer to Utah when he went out there, but there was a death in his family, he said this week. Didn't want to move his wife Kim out to Utah at that time, so they went different paths. But also the connection with Urban Meyer and Billy Gonzalez, the Illinois offensive coordinator, co-offensive coordinator. They were together for a dozen years at different stops, and so there's a lot of intertwining. These guys are good friends. Obviously today they're not going to be friends, they're going to be trying to beat each other, but interesting connection between the two.
We heard at Big Ten Media Day, they don't talk as much as they used to this year, ever since they both took these jobs in the Big Ten.
Yeah, once the season started, they quit talking, but they'll talk again in the summer. And Urban Meyer mentioned this week as well his admiration for Tim Beckman's dad, David Beckman, who was also a coach, longtime coach in the state of Ohio. So those ties do go deep.
Yeah. But Urban Meyer will not take it easy on Tim Beckman, and as much as he wants to see his friend do well, he also wants to rub him into the ground. He also wants to impress poll voters, and so don't be surprised if Urban Meyer scores every possible point they can score. Now, does that mean if he has a chance to score a late touchdown in a blowout game that he might have the guy kneel down? I hope so, and maybe he'll do that, but he doesn't seem to be the sympathetic type to me. So, and I think he is like all football coaches should be, which is pretty darn ruthless because you don't know when that game's going to turn.
I think he would even say a little bit psychotic, but in a good way, you know.
Well, you
the
want
way
your
a football
to be
coach wants to be.
psychotic,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and if you look at it, and not saying this could happen today, because obviously it would be a huge upset for Illinois to go into Columbus and win today.
Right.
But at the Horseshoe, and you guys know this, covering the team a long time, they've had a lot of success. They've had more wins than anybody against Ohio State except Michigan.
3 of the last 5 times there they won.
Yeah.
The best game I've ever seen Illinois play was in 2007 in Columbus. It was an unbelievable game. It was where everything came together. It was where Ron Zook listened to his players. Remember, Juice Williams said, "Hey, let's go for it on 4th and 1." Turned out to be the game-saving play because Illinois ran out the clock, and that team was a miracle. That was a miracle win for Illinois. Probably the most impressive win they've had in a long time.
You know what, the way the season is going for the Illini, this may be the win left on their schedule. Who knows? We'll see. Game kicks off on ESPN at 3:30 Columbus time, 2:30 Central time. Hopefully you're watching. Thank you for watching this Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. We'll see you next Saturday.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by your local Anheuser-Busch distributors. Ray Eldridge Jewelry, elegance without the attitude. Peoria and Decatur. Physician's Choice Wellness, give away your weight today. And Buffalo Wild Wings, Mattoon, Champaign, Savoy.